Microphone number 2. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Me? Okay. My name's Trish Letien. I'm from Shawnigan Lake. I do volunteer for the Green Party. My question is for all candidates. I would like to know where you stand in regards to public broadcasting. And currently, Canada is ranked 16th out of 18 Western countries.
So sorry, that is your question then? Where do you stand on public broadcasting?
That's the first part.
Okay.
And the second part is, are you willing to increase funding to bring Canada in the top half of Western country public broadcasting funding?
Thank you. Ms. DeLong, we start with you.
Well, I've been actually quite concerned over the last while in terms of how much government money is going into at least the news side. The news side it's quite strange that a government would be putting that kind of money into the news. For somebody who's been around for a while and know the direction that can go in, a state-controlled state-controlled news is a little bit going in a dangerous direction, put it that way. But in terms of the arts, okay, in terms of the arts and public broadcasting, I think that yes, that is a very valid place for a government to be investing money. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Well, I believe that public broadcasting in this country, and indeed many countries like Great Britain and in Australia, has a remarkable legacy of connecting our rural communities and making sure that they're served with up-to-date information, arts and programming funding. So absolutely, I absolutely salute the significance of the CBC and its proud history in Canada. I would like to see it continue. I would like to see the funding dedicated to it to make sure that it has the same stature as in many other countries. And to rebut the point that was just made, I wouldn't call it a state broadcaster. Yes, the CBC does get its funding from the government, but it's like an independent crown corporation. It has to abide by journalistic standards. It's run independently of the government. But I think it's very important to have an entity that is not controlled by commercial corporate interests.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you for the question about public broadcasting. I spent a lot of time listening to the CBC with my children when they were growing up, and it's really just the role of public broadcasting and bringing that lens to the news and the world, really. And to this day, now with my grandchildren, we sit and listen to the CBC and public broadcasting in different ways, and it really invigorates discussions about who we are and what we think about the world. The Greens have a commitment to public broadcasting and would increase funding to the CBC and look at finding ways to ensure that as we support that and do that work, we want to make sure that there isn't political interference at the board level, so we're not getting the sort of lens that detracts from the quality of service that public broadcasting makes to Canadians.
Mr. Herbert.
Yes, I'm certainly a supporter of the CBC, and I think they do a fine job. I think it has to be sort of separated from government so that there's no dictation there about what they should be covering or shouldn't be covering. I'm also a supporter of the CRTC and their cultural requirements for radio stations and that sort of thing. I think that's a great idea. Otherwise, we would just be overrun with American culture in this country. Alana mentioned about the getting money from the government. I think what she was going at it for. Independent newspapers and how that was a bad thing. The independent newspapers and the independent news service in this country is going through a bit of a transition. And I don't think it's a bad idea to get some cash to help them along so that they survive and can come out the other end of this transition. And I am certainly in support of that. This is, again, another arm's length thing. Alana,
And thank you very much.
Okay.
Ms. DeLong, a chance to rebut.
That's- $600 million is a lot of money. Each of us, the max that we can each spend is $112,000. So there's real controls put on the amount of money that politically we can spend, and yet $600 million was put into this, and one of the people on it was somebody who has very publicly said that their whole purpose is to stop the Conservative Party. And that is not an independent organization.
I'm sorry, did I miss that? Was there a mention of your party? Did I not catch that? No,
That's okay.
you mentioned her name. That was all. I just got it that way. So,
Oh, I see.
okay, all right. All right, a written question provided. The topic is cannabis. What does your party intend to do to reduce the red tape and barriers for cannabis producers and processors and retailers to get the now legal product to market, as the black market for cannabis is still alive and thriving? What does your party intend to do to reduce the red tape and barriers for cannabis producers, processors, and retailers to get the now legal product to market, as the black market for cannabis is still alive and thriving? We begin with Mr. MacGregor.
Well, I just cannot believe how bungled this file has been with this current Liberal government. I honestly, I was our justice critic back in 2017 when C-45 was introduced, and we know we had the report that guided its drafting, and all throughout the debate in the House of Commons, we kept on repeatedly pointing out the fact that Health Canada had to start acting to making sure that it was ready for when this bill became law. And one of our main criticisms was that this was not really legalizing cannabis. It was basically making it less illegal because there's still very strict parameters. But I mean, only the government could lose money in selling drugs. It's quite amazing. But honestly, no, it's a very serious question because we've had a lot of time to get this right. And over 4 years, we're still seeing the problems today. A lot of producers who are ready, willing, and able to go have had to wait through unnecessary delays in Health Canada. And I think it's time that the Liberals owned up to responsibility on this.
Thank you very much.
Took responsibility.
Mr. Herbert, the Liberal Party was mentioned there. Do you want a chance to rebut?
I'll just wait until I've got my time, sure. When they
You're
come
fine?
by.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
Ms.
just-
Hwitsum?
Thank you. We're now a year into, I think it was just the birthday of the legalization of marijuana in this country recently, and we know that there are real flaws in terms of the regulatory framework when it comes to cannabis. Then there are all kinds of steps I think we can take in terms of ensuring that we can look at lowering the federal set price for cannabis. And as long as that price is higher than the black market, then we know what a consumer is going to do. So we need to ensure that we're, pricing in a way that is competitive, eliminating some requirements around how we order it and package it and those sort of things. We need as well to reduce or eliminate the taxes on medicinal use of marijuana products. There's all these regulations around it, so taking those steps to look at how do we ensure there's still safety and quality in production, but what about growing outdoors?
And thank you very much. Mr. Herbert, to you.
Thank you. I would just mention, and it's obvious, I think, to everybody in this room, that the reason that the cannabis is legalized is because of the Liberal government. So you're welcome. Now, the way they did it, they had a long run up to this thing. It seemed to take forever. It was sort of when it was rolled out that it is now illegal. The sky didn't fall as a number of people thought that was going to happen. But they've left it to the provinces to deliver the product, and it has been mishandled by pretty much every province across the country. I understand the Ontario government lost $41 million selling drugs, and I don't know how they managed to do that, but they did, right? But this is, everything is in transition. I've never seen anything get started up without any issues, and this one sure has some issues. But I think we will be in a spot within a year or so where everything will be going fine. So
Thank you. Ms. DeLong.
We intend to monitor the consequences of legalization and make changes where necessary to protect children, or mainly to protect children, and also to keep the profits out of the hands of criminals. And but yes, it has been a bit of a mess. And but we'll just be dealing with the new reality of legalized marijuana. Thank you.
Back to microphone number 1.
Hi, I'm Eden Haythornthwaite. I live in North Cowichan, and I'm currently unaffiliated. I have to read this. Can you please tell us how you and your party...
And I'm sorry, ma'am, all candidates or one?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please, all candidates.
candidates, okay.
I think that's pretty much been the way it's gone, eh? Can you please tell us how you and your party would legislate to proceed with not just reconciliation, but reparations for all Indigenous people in Canada?
Ms. Hwitsum, we start with you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the question. There are a whole number of pathways to self-determination with respect to Indigenous peoples, and part of any legislative exercise would have to recognize that and ensure that the pathway to self-determination is recognized in the context of existing rights and title for Indigenous people. We know that we have the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People that sets out minimum standards when it comes to really, Indigenous rights are human rights, and we're talking about the implementation of recommendations that have been supported and endorsed, whether it's through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or the Missing and Murdered Women's. There's lots of evidence to support and reports to support we need to make strong investments recognizing the authority and rights of Indigenous peoples in their pathway to self-determination.
Mr. Herbert.
as far as reconciliation goes, we have made an awful lot of progress on this file in the last 4 years. According to Perry Bellegarde, the national chief, we have made more progress in 4 years than the rest of the government has in the past 50 years. So we're getting we're making progress on it. Is there still issues with it? Absolutely. And we have to move ahead. But we've also put through in the last 4 years the Murdered and Missing Women's Inquiry, which went on for, what was it, 2 years almost, and that was something that was being held up by the previous government for quite a while. So we are making inroads. The other thing I would mention is we got 87 different boil water advisories lifted also over the last 4 years, and I think we're on track to have all of them lifted by 2021. Thank you.
Ms. DeLong.
I don't believe that there can be any true and lasting reconciliation without economic reconciliation. And yes, I am seeing some really positive things come out over the last 10 years, really, of really good indications that things are moving in the right direction now. There are what I call my heroes. Within the Native community, and people like Ellis B. Ross, who is now an MLA in Victoria, and leaders like that who have been leading their people into prosperity. And so anything at all that we can do to encourage this and to make sure that that they have the opportunities that we have come to expect ourselves. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Well, I have to give acknowledgement to my friend, colleague, and New Democrat Member of Parliament, Romeo Saganash, who hails from the Cree Nation in northern Quebec, because it was through his hard work that we finally had a bill to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that was debated in the House of Commons, was passed, and then went to the Senate, where it was blocked by Conservative senators. The unelected and unaccountable Conservative senators are the ones that made that bill die when Parliament was dissolved. And I think it's a shame because we were close. The democratically elected House of Commons made its will known. And finally, we were seeing some real progress. You know, a House of Commons now sees Indigenous languages spoken in. For the first time ever, we've heard Dene, we've heard Cree. It's been an amazing revolution. And I have to just raise my hands and salute all the wise counsel I've received over the years from Penelakut, from Pachidat, Layaksin, and of course, Cowichan tribes.
And thank you. Ms. DeLong, the chance to rebut? To rebut? The Conservative Party was mentioned there.
No, that's fine.
You're fine? Okay, super. All right, a written question from the floor. All candidates, the topic is taxation. At what combined family income level does your party no longer consider working families middle class? At what combined family income level does your party no longer consider working families middle class? Mr. Herbert, we start with you.
Oh, sure, give this one to me. Thank you. I would suggest, I know the average income here in Cowichan is about $70,000, according to Statistics Canada. So I would say that once you are probably over 100,000, that you would be considered not middle class anymore. I was talking to a fella one day and having supper with him, and he considers himself to be in the middle class, and I informed him based on the amount of money that he made that he was in the top 1%, and he had a hard time believing that. But I think if you do make over $60,000 in Cowichan, you make more than 80% of the people in this area. So those are the numbers. Thanks.
Ms. DeLong.
I have no idea. No, I mean, in terms of when I say middle class, I think that, yes, I probably do include people that are up to 100,000, but even at 100,000, if you are, a family of 100,000, it's, you don't have any free ride. It's it's even at 100,000. If you've got a family and working, then yeah, it can be a stretch even at 100,000. And the people that are lower than that, yeah, it's really hard. I'm finding that when I was door knocking, that affordability was really something that affected everybody, and so we're really going to be working on getting affordability down. Thank you,
Mr. MacGregor.
Middle class is almost impossible to find because it means different things to different people in different regions. And I think you have to look at a person's income and how much the day-to-day costs of living are affecting that income. We had an interesting debate at the start of the 42nd Parliament with the Liberals when they brought in their so-called middle-class tax break. What that actually was a middle-income tax break that affected incomes between $45,000 and $90,000. Of course, the median income in Canada is below that. So most Canadians were not getting the benefit. And in fact, every Liberal member of Parliament gave themselves the maximum tax rate, of course, because their income was above $90,000. So we've had this debate in the House of Commons. I have not yet heard a Liberal actually nail a definitive figure, so I understand the difficulty with that. But I think when we're trying to make life easier for middle-class families, we have to look at the cost of housing, the cost of healthcare, and making sure that those costs are dealt with appropriately through leadership from the federal government.
Mr. Herbert, again, Liberal Party was mentioned. Would you like to rebut?
No, I'll save it. I'll do something later. Fine, thanks.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you very much. And that's certainly a very, very difficult question. And when you think about the middle class, you think, well, you've got affordable housing, you're able to manage affordable housing, you're able to be food secure, you're able to ensure the safety of your family. And so what is that number? For one thing, there are regional impacts in terms of how much money you need to earn in order to be in the middle class, whether in an urban area or in a rural area. So setting that number, I think, is part of a review we would need to do to establish a progressive taxation system that takes into account. We need to not only identify at what number of your income you're in the middle class, but also how to actually target investments so that we are actually supporting the middle class through a fair progressive taxation system.
All right. So we're over to microphone number 2. Sir.
Hello, good evening. Keith Thompson, and I did volunteer for Alana's campaign. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fulfill that due to surgery. My question is to the Green Party in relation to climate. If Canada, in the context of Canada's overall ratio and responsibility on a global setting of 1.6 compared to China's 27.4, is this not a case of the Greens tying their entire hinge pin of their platform to one topic when there's other issues that we have to deal with inside Canada, and thereby justifying Greens' attempt to be on the national stage?
So to the Green Party.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think it's really important to recognize that the role that we have as global citizens, but it's also important to recognize that domestically we want to be able to look to future generations, ensure that we've made the investments to ensure we're moving towards investing in a green economy, ensuring that as we do that, we support and invest in renewable energy so that we accept that the portion of our contribution to pollution is definitely not disconnected from the rest of the world. So we definitely need to have a strategy in terms of supporting, whether it's through other investment or looking at our pollution reducing technologies to support the reduction around the world, but we still must ensure that we meet our targets for the wellness of Canadians.
A written question. Topic: affordable housing. What initiatives would you undertake to create infrastructure for multi-generational housing that is affordable, similar to various successes in Europe? All candidates. What initiatives would you undertake to create infrastructure for multi-generational housing that is affordable, similar to various successes in Europe? Ms. DeLong, we start with you.
We would really like everyone to be able to move forward with their dreams. And one of those dreams is home ownership. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be working on. We are going to be re-examining the stress test to make sure that that people who actually can afford to buy a house, that they're not stopped because of that stress test. We're also going to be introducing 30-year mortgages to make sure that that's spread out more. And so you know, those are two things in terms of homes. The other thing is that we are getting, well, we've got a lot of regulations. You know, we've got regulations, you know, that stop us from doing this and stop us from doing that and stop us from doing the other thing. And one of the things that we're stopping is the building of houses.
Thank you. Mr. MacGreggor.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I had this really great meeting with Dean Fortin, the former mayor of Victoria. He now works for VITVca Housing, and he was showing me these plans for a multi-generational housing complex in the West Shore. One that was designed to, you know, have everyone from a bachelor to young families to older senior citizens after the kids had moved out. And this was all in the same complex. And what it fostered was a sense of community, because you could live in the same complex the whole duration of your life, but choosing different units for each stage of your life that you're in. So I think those great local initiatives are what we should be concentrating on. Where the federal government, of course, can step in is, again, assuming that leadership role in the building of federal housing like we used to in the post-war period. That's why we've committed to building 500,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years, of making sure that, you know, people who are having trouble with their rental payments have that subsidy.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the question. There's a number of things we can do. One, in terms of coordinating towards a national housing strategy, the appointment of a Minister of Housing so that we can actually look at ways that we can address, oversee, and collaborate with provinces, including municipalities, depending on, in thinking of the regulatory frameworks within which each of those jurisdictions impact housing. So looking at increasing direct investment into housing, an annual commitment of 25,000 new homes and rehabilitation of 15,000 new homes over the course of 10 years, and really looking at developing programs in terms of the options for co-op housing, home sharing, turning to the infrastructure bank to ensure that we find the sort of investments that are necessary for us to support access to affordable quality housing at all stages.
Mr. Herbert.
We were able to establish a national housing strategy within the last 4 years. It's a $55 billion plan spent over or moved over 10 years. Would include rent subsidies. Most of the money goes out through the way the federal government seems to do it is go out through the provinces and municipalities, and all that framework is getting put in place. So we will be able to deliver on that as we're coming up. The big part of the problem, though, is that the previous federal government got out of the housing business about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, actually. And so we've ended up with a void in new housing supplied by the government over, there was a 10-year period where nothing really happened. So we're playing catch up a lot, and so we're doing our best at getting up and running, but we have established a national housing strategy at $55 billion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, microphone number 1.
Sorry. My name is Ashley Vomaka. I'm not currently affiliated with any particular party. My question is for all the candidates. I wanted to know if you specifically or, your party has any plans to tackle inaccessibility to rehab facilities that you can get into using MSP, because obviously we have a huge problem with addiction, which leads to homelessness in the Cowichan Valley.
So your question is?
There are a lot of barriers facing people trying to get into rehab facilities where private rehab can run 20 grand or more. And I wanted to know if you have anything planned to tackle those problems.
Thank you. Mr. MacGreggor, we start with you.
Yeah, I think this ties in with part of a previous answer I gave with respect to the opioid crisis. I think, one of those 4 major steps that the federal government has to take leadership role in is making sure that we have that full range of treatment options available. And I think through, declaring a national health emergency, because so many of our communities are being affected by the drug crisis, you can actually free up federal funds, because under the federal statute, the Emergencies Act, when you declare a national health emergency, it allows Ottawa to free up funds to give them to communities and provinces that are really in need. And you're absolutely right. We need that full range of rehab options, but also like non-barrier housing, right? Because so many people who are suffering from addiction problems don't have a house or a home to begin with. So you need to have that full range of treatment options. Our frontline workers are overworked, they're stressed out, and they need all the help they can get. I want to see the federal government be there to back them up.
Thank you. Ms. Hwitsum.
Oh, thanks very much. And you made a good point in terms of how do we address investing in the sort of infrastructure that will actually help us deal with the opioid crisis. In the work that we did when I was chairing the First Nations Health Authority, and we were facing these questions around access, how do we ensure that people have access to service? The quality of service they're getting is such that when they come out, we don't realize once a person is ready for treatment and they go for treatment, and when they're done, they need to have the wraparound services to access to them, for them to access so they can keep on that path of wellness and the battle against their addiction, and ensure we make those sort of investments with the follow-up services that really make a difference.
Mr. Herbert.
Yes, with regards to barriers to rehab, one of the big barriers is a lot of people aren't ready to go in there. That's a choice is a huge barrier. A lot of the people that are on the street certainly have issues, and they're not ready yet to go into those types of facilities. But if we can get more facilities, perhaps they will be more prone to go in them. One of the, we were talking previously about barriers to housing. Right now, like I mentioned earlier on, was all the people that we're employing in the homeless industry here to support the homeless people. We could put all of those people in housing with the same amount of money that we are spending on trying to fix the homeless issue. Because we spend locally here through the provincial government and local governments here millions of dollars that we could just put towards actually solving the problem
And
instead
thank
of
you very
talking
much.
about it any longer.
Ms. DeLong.
Yeah, that's something that we were attacking head on in my previous life as an MLA. It is tied into the housing, but it's tied into the housing in that the services have to be there. If you just put people in housing without providing the services, it just doesn't work. And it's been proven over and over again not to work. So we need more investment in addictions, in actual services for addictions. And there are things that work out there. There really are, and we need to make sure that we're using them. Thank you.
A written question, and I'm going to be challenged to stay within my own rules as there's quite a bit here. So to all candidates, the topic, small business, fisheries, and environment. Healthy, abundant salmon stocks and the fisheries they support are vitally important to many. The effects, impacts, and benefits to small communities and businesses from accessible to sustainable resources is socially and economically vital to BC. Does your party support the use of mass marketing and marked selective fisheries as a way to provide access to abundant stocks of hatchery-produced salmon and to avoid stocks of concern? I'll read the question part again. Does your party support the use of mass marking and marked selective fisheries as a way to provide access to abundant stocks of hatchery-produced salmon and to avoid stocks of concern? Ms. Hwitsum, we start with you.
Thank you. When we look at how the natural resources, and just a quick comment in terms of, we actually import more of our seafood for consumption and export most of our local resources to international markets. So just looking at how we can ensure that, one, we don't have open pen, that we have closed containment production that can really contribute, of course, to our ongoing economy, and marketing from a sustainable perspective, ensuring that we put the protection of our natural and wild species and habitat in front of those decisions, and that be the lens when we're looking at not only the production of our resources, but the sustainability and the priority for Canadian access to our own seafood resources.
Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. One of the issues with the fishery, of course, is that most of our fish are caught offshore before they ever get a chance to get back here for us to catch them. So that's an issue, and we need to, I think, on the island especially, I think we're set up for very well for hatcheries, so that we can produce more fish and get them out into the waters. The whole salmon farming thing is an issue. We have looked at basically transitioning the salmon farming in the water to closed containment by 2025. Just so you know, the licenses that they get now are restricted to a very short period of time. It's a year at a time. And the industry is aware that this is what's going to be happening. So they've been working on it for a few years, and we just have to get them out of the water, but we also have to grow some more of our own fish.
And thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. DeLong.
Yeah, this is actually somewhere that we have been underfunding this. We do have some very good community-led conservation organizations that have been doing the hatcheries, and we need to do more of them. We need to enhance and rebuild our wild Pacific salmon stocks by increasing the support for the community-led conservation. We need to complete new recovery plans for all of Canada's critical fisheries. And of course, we need to support the advancements of technology and practices that do reduce the contact between the wild and farmed salmon. And there's been some incredibly good work that's been done in this area, and I hope that it continues. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Yes, I have been in close contact with many recreational fishers who reside in Cowichan-Malahat-Langford, and indeed New Democrat members of Parliament on Vancouver Island supported the call to the fisheries minister to make sure that, particularly with Chinook salmon, that he would ease up the retention rules to allow for hatchery-raised or marked fish to be retained by recreational fishers. Because for many coastal communities, you're absolutely right. This is the heart of their small business little empire. Like, that's what draws tourists, is the amazing fishing opportunities that come. But I also think that with, you know, supporting the retention and hatchery efforts, the retention of hatchery-marked fish, we also have to look at coastal restoration measures. That's why I was so proud that when we had the combined federal-provincial funding announcement here in the Cowichan River of $4 million to allow for the engineering design of the Cowichan Weir. I advocated for that project with the fisheries minister, but there's also a lot more that needs to be done.
Thank you very much. All right, just looking at the clock, we probably have room for 6 or 7 more questions, just to give you a sense of that. Microphone number 2.
Good evening. My name's Sarah Nellis. I'm a resident of Municipality of North Cowichan, and my question is directed to Blair Herbert. Mr. Herbert, can you name 3 significant environmental projects undertaken by the Liberal government in the last 4 years that demonstrate their commitment to reducing greenhouse gases and combating climate change?
Sure. We have, well, first of all, we've established our environmental plan, which is about a $70 billion plan over 10 years. That was done in 2018. Since then, we have been in contact and in negotiations with over 1,200 different transit authorities across the country. We have also established the $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan. We have designated about $27 billion to, again, to infrastructure for transit. We have also put the carbon tax in place across the country, which, as long as certain party governments don't keep hauling us into court, that should be holding fairly soon. I just don't want to mention their name, but the and you know, all those things. There's a number of other things. There's about 50 different things that the federal government has done in the last little while to get this climate file moving.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we should have a process question. I'm just going to check with Ms. DeLong.
Just, no, I am enjoying this immensely, but the schedule did say that it was supposed to go to 8:30.
No, 9:30, ma'am. 9:30. Yep.
Okay.
9:30.
Okay.
All right, the next question from the floor. Immigration. Do you oppose the federal government's open borders agenda and increased immigration levels? All candidates, do you oppose the federal government's open borders agenda and increased immigration levels? Mr. Herbert, we start with you.
Sure. I didn't realize we had an open borders agenda. I think that maybe whoever wrote this question is talking about the people that are walking across the border, the southern border. That is not an immigration issue. That is a refugee issue. People are arriving at our borders, claiming asylum and refugee status. There's a process that we have to put them through, and we've been doing this since probably the 1960s. Where people come in, they go before a refugee judge, and they do an inquiry to see whether they are actually refugees. There is a definition of refugee. If they do not fall within that definition, they are then removed from the country. And a lot of the ones coming across the border are removed from the country. So on the south border, we might have a refugee issue, but we certainly don't have an immigration issue. There's a big difference.
Ms. DeLong.
Well, thank you. A Conservative government will work immediately to restore the fairness, order, and compassion of our immigration system. And we're going to safeguard and emphasize economic immigration. We're going to stand up for families and ensure that spouses and children can be reunited. We're going to improve credential recognition. We have problems with not enough doctors, and they come here and they don't have their credentials are not recognized. But we're also going to put an end to illegal border crossings. This has cost our government an enormous amount of money, and it's also backlogged the rest of the system. And so by closing the loophole in the safe third-party country agreement that allows some people just to skip the line and avoid the queue, we need immigrants. We do need immigrants, but we need to restore the fairness, order, and compassion of our immigration system. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
I'm not aware of an open border agenda, and I'm sorry, but what the Conservatives just said is categorically false. There is no queue jumping. There are two separate streams of immigration. And we have to look at what's causing this. What is causing people to come through at unreported border crossings? It's because we have a safe third-party agreement with the United States that is currently led by an administration which is making many refugees, often with legitimate claims of feeling unsafe, they are now feeling unsafe in the United States. So if we were to get rid of the safe third-party agreement with the United States, it would encourage people who are fleeing oppression and violence to actually report at a border crossing, a port of entry, and to get legitimately processed. And there, of course, we would determine whether they are legitimate refugees or not. I think in this whole discussion, we have to start opening our hearts and having some more compassion for people who are trying to escape with nothing more than the clothes on their back. They're often fleeing war-torn regions with a lot of...
Thank you very much. Ms. DeLong, the chance to rebut.
No, I said what I believe.
Okay. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. When it comes to our borders, I mean, we need to protect our borders, and at the same time, we know that we need to review our immigration policy. We need to attract immigrants and establish a fair system. We need to ensure that where there are professional immigrants with professional credentials, that their credentials are verified or be able to use their, through immigration, be able to offer those services and be regulated and licensed and be able to contribute their professional services to society. We also, there's so many pieces, right, in terms of reunification of families is so critical. Having our minds as well open to finding a definition for, we have an immigration process, but we also have climate refugees, and we need to ensure that we come up with a definition for that, and we understand that our commitment to reviewing the immigration policy would take into account our economic needs and social needs.
And thank you very much. Microphone number one.
My name is Robert Howell. I live in North Cowichan, and I'm not affiliated with any party at the moment. I have a question on foreign policy and foreign aid. We know that...
And I'm sorry, sir, all candidates?
Sorry, all candidates, yes, please. We know that there are 3 surefire things you can do to alleviate poverty in the third world. 1, give women control over their own fertility. 2, encourage women's literacy.
I'm going to need a question here, sir.
One more. And 3, to encourage women's entrepreneurship. What would each of the parties do to encourage initiatives in these 3 areas?
Thank you. Ms. DeLong, we start with you.
Minutes going. Canada must always side with those who value freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And so we are going to be working to make sure that our foreign policy actually supports that. And so we're going to be strengthening our relationships with NORAD, NATO, Kanzak, Commonwealth, the Francophonie, and the Five Eyes. We are going to be it might sound a little bit backwards, but we are going to be cutting our foreign aid by 25%. But at the same time, where we're cutting it is we're cutting it to the money that's going to the...
Thank you. Mr. MacGregor.
Upholding the rights of women and girls internationally will always be a central focus of New Democratic foreign policy, full stop. I think those are some of the most beneficial and worthwhile investments we can make in developing countries to make sure that young girls who are growing up in different countries have those equal opportunities, that they have hope. This is really about investing in children, but also making sure women, 1/2 of the population has the exact same rights as their male counterparts. I think a troubling thing that we've seen over the last number of decades is if you look at Canada's foreign aid budget as a percentage of our GDP, it's really at one of its lowest rates in decades. And I think, Canada is recognized around the world because of the goodwill that's given to us because of our foreign aid. But a lot more could be done. And I think that's the strong leadership role that Canada can serve around the world, shining as a beacon of hope to many people.
Thank you. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think, there are studies clearly that show when you make investments in women and girls, whether it's investments in terms of making even microloans available to women, that makes an exponential difference in their ability to support their family and grow the well-being of their family. With respect to girls, we have to, women and girls, ensuring we invest in education and the opportunity for access to education. There's so many inequities around the world in terms of women and girls, and whether it's access to services or being marginalized in terms of their role and the role that they can play in their families and their communities in building economy through microloan investment and education.
Mr. Herbert.
I certainly agree with the gentleman that proposed the question. Talking about the way we get success in foreign aid is through women's access to birth control, women's entrepreneurship, and women's literacy. And, we spend about $6 billion a year in foreign aid. And it sounds like a lot of money, but from a rich country like Canada, it's not a huge amount. And we are one of the richest countries in the world. And if we can't help some of these people in these other countries, I don't know who will. The previous government had a policy when they were giving away foreign aid. It always had things tied to it, and one of the things that was tied to it was that they couldn't be using any of the money that had anything to do with birth control for women in that area. and I think that's a shame. And that goes back to the attitude of the people that were in power at that time. Again, I won't mention their name, but
Thank you very much. There we are. Sorry, Ms. DeLong, did you have a question?
Yes,
I'm sorry, are you looking to speak? Is that what you're saying?
I was just he referred to the concern.
Did you? I'm sorry, I may have missed that.
Yeah.
Yep, so was that the case? All right.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we're getting some no's as well. I didn't hear it myself. I didn't hear Conservative Party or your name. There was inference, but not the specific use of name, so there isn't a chance to rebut. Okay? A written question. The topic to all candidates, guns. Canada manufactures and sells arms to countries such as Saudi Arabia, and our weapons are used for killing defenseless people. Will your party be courageous enough to state its position on the continuation of supporting war and death, and will it be able to withstand the arms industry lobby and pressure from so-called allies? And will it be courageous enough to stop selling arms? So because I just tripped there a little bit, to read the question part again, will your party be courageous enough to state its position on the continuation of supporting war and death, and will it be able to withstand the arms industry lobby and pressure from so-called allies, and will it be courageous enough to stop selling arms? Mr. MacGregor, we start with you.
So Canada now has the dubious distinction of being one of the top arms exporters to the Middle East, which of course is a region fraught with conflict and human rights abuses all around. And of course, this specific question is making reference to the $15 billion arms deal to Saudi Arabia, a regime that is known for tons of human rights abuses against its own citizens, not to mention the illegal and unethical war it is currently waging against the citizens of Yemen. I think this is a shameful episode in Canadian foreign policy, and absolutely a new Democratic government would stand up to the industry lobby, cancel that deal, and make sure that our defense industries are actually working for the people who need it. Our own Canadian forces. Our Canadian forces have been begging for the equipment to allow them to do the important work that they need to do. So I think it's time that we step up to the plate and make sure that our brave men and women in uniform actually have the equipment they need.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. Excuse me. The Green Party definitely believes in building and keeping peace. So when we look at, do we have the courage to stand up for human rights? Yes, we do. Do we have the courage to stand up to those that are the most egregious human rights abusers and using mechanisms that, whether it's an economic deal with access to guns that we need to stop? In terms of the relationships that we have as being a, well known for our arms development, it seems counterintuitive to the idea of peace building. We also need to ensure, of course, that our military is properly equipped, and at the same time, we can't be making side deals that compromise human rights and the rights of even Canadian citizens, and have the courage to stand up for the human rights and against those human rights abuses.
Mr. Herbert.
Sure, thanks for the question. The whole Saudi deal was, first of all, entered into more than 4 years ago when we were not the government, but the delivery for these items did fall into when we were government. And I think part of the problem with this whole thing is once we as a country enter into an agreement to supply another country with whatever we're supplying with them, that we have to follow through on that commitment to supply whatever it is, whether it's food or arms or Jeeps in this case. This is a $15 billion contract, and there's a very large company in London that employs a lot of union people, and I'm surprised that the NDP doesn't support these guys. But we would throw a whole pile of people out of work, and we would be sued by that corporation, and we would be sued probably by the country of Saudi Arabia. We have to follow through with these things, or our reputation across the world will be damaged as a reasonable partner to deal with.
And thank you. Mr. MacGregor.
So first of all, it's not Jeeps, it's light armored vehicles, which we now have photographic evidence that they're actually being used against civilians and to suppress the local population. And secondly, of course we support good union paying jobs. That's why my response mentioned making sure that they're working for the Canadian military. It's in need of that equipment, and that's precisely what we would follow through with.
All right, back to the floor. Move on microphone number 2.
Good evening. My name's Kim Hughes, and I'm on the Riding Association for the Green Party. My question is for all candidates. In 2015, Mr. Trudeau ran his campaign on the promise it would be the last election under the first-past-the-post electoral system. Given that a proportional system of voting would make every vote count equally, where does your party stand on the question of electoral reform?
Ms. Hwitsum, we start with you.
Thank you. The Green Party definitely sees the need for electoral reform, and recognizing the level of representation that actually happens in the House as a result of first past the post is disappointing. So we need to be able to support proportional representation and take the steps to ensure that every vote that's cast by a Canadian counts and makes a difference in terms of the representation that we have in Parliament.
Mr. Herbert.
I am not a fan of proportional representation for a number of reasons, and we've voted on this in BC now 3 times, and it's been turned down each time. What happens in proportional representation is that the ridings become twice the size. This riding here is already 5,500 square kilometers. I don't want to see it to be 11,000 kilometers. We have 2 different tiers of members of parliament, where one is elected and the other one is appointed by party leaders. We end up with about 40% of the members of parliament being appointed by party leaders. In my opinion, this is a bastardization of a democracy when you have all these people being appointed. We used to rail against the Senate, which was appointed, and now we're okay if our members of parliament are appointed. I just don't understand that. So I'm not a fan of that. I am a fan of the Liberal Party, and I voted for them, and I supported them in the last election. But they did go down the road of proportional representation a bit, and I've got to end there.
Thank you very much. Ms. DeLong.
Thank you. Every one of your votes will definitely be counting this election, and I'm very glad of that. I actually thought that proportional representation was a good idea until I was actually elected. Because when I was elected, what happened was there was a relationship set up. It was a direct relationship. Every single one of my constituents I was responsible to. And every one of them determined whether or not I got elected again. And when we lose that piece, when we have appointed people, they not only are not responsible back the way that a representative is, but also they also sway things considerably. You know, I know how to work in a caucus, and I know what happens when the party comes in and starts pushing the elected officials.
And thank you very much. Mr. MacGreggor.
See, the problem is that a lot of Canadians voted for the Liberal Party in 2015 precisely because of that promise. And when you break that kind of a promise, it breeds cynicism in our politics. It was such a central focus of the Liberal campaign of 2015. You know, I've sat in the House of Commons, I've seen majority government in action, and the system needs an update. What New Democrats are proposing to do is that in our first mandate, we would establish an independent citizens' assembly to look at all the different models of proportional representation. We would make sure the system that's chosen fits the context of Canada, and we would give it a test drive. After we had held one election under such a system, we would then give the citizens of Canada a referendum to see whether they wanted to keep the new system or go back to first past the post. I think, you know, if you're going to buy a car, it makes sense to test drive it before you make a decision. So that's our commitment to you, and unlike the Liberals, we're going to hold to it.
Thank you. Mr. Herbert to rebut.
Hello, there we go. You know, in the last election, Alistair MacGreggor won this riding with 35% of the riding. 65% of the people did not vote for him in the last federal election. Right now, but he still seems that he is legitimate. He is the member of parliament from this area, and it's on every other riding where they don't win that they think that proportional representation should apply. I'm fine with first past the post, right?
And
Whoever
thank you very
wins
much. A question from the floor. To all candidates, the topic, seniors' care. There's only one round of rebuttal. Sorry, it doesn't go back and forth. It's just one chance to rebut. All right? Sorry, I wasn't talking to the microphone. My apologies. But only one chance to rebut. So it's just, if it's mentioned in the answer, there is a chance for a candidate to rebut, but we don't go back and forth. All right? Seniors' care, all candidates. What will your government do to ensure quality care for our aging demographic? And Mr. Herbert, we start with you.
As far as seniors care goes, we are proposing anyway to increase the OAS by 10% when people reach 75. We've changed some of the survivor benefits on CPP as well. I think where the federal government does have some responsibility or an opportunity is with regards to a dementia strategy across the country. You know, with the aging population, we are having more and more people.
Sorry, Mr. Herbert, just one moment, please. We're just going to pause for a second. We'll reset your time. Ladies, okay? Sorry. My apologies, but we'll reset the timers. Have you got that? You good? My apologies again to interrupt, but please carry on.
Sorry, with the dementia strategy, I just think there's an opportunity for the federal government to look at an across the country strategy there to deal with dementia. A lot of our population is getting older, and it seems to be a more prevalent disease than it's been in the past. So I would certainly support an initiative like that.
Ms. DeLong.
Well, thank you. Being a senior myself, this is something that, you know, I think about. And first of all, there's essentially two issues. First of all, there's just the affordability for seniors on fixed income, and that's why, you know, we're pushing so hard to get costs down and scrap the karma tax, get the GST off of home heating, and then the reduction in taxes from 15% down to 13 3/4. The other thing is that when it comes to a senior's care, that falls under social services and under health services, which are our provincial responsibilities. I believe we're still the only party that has guaranteed the increase in health care transfers and social services transfers to the provinces so that they can.
And thank you very much.
Deal.
Mr. MacGregor.
Well, over the last 4 years, I have met with many seniors in my constituency office, and the concern is a very real one and very well founded. Many people who are in their retirement years or about to retire are quite concerned about, you know, what the long-term prospects are going to be for them. And many people are dealing with aging parents and concerned about their care. So yes, most of these services are delivered by provincial governments, but I've always felt that the federal government has that important leadership role to play through a national seniors strategy, coordinating, making sure all the provinces have the same kind of resources available to them. But also, I think, you know, the great power the federal government has is through the Canada Health Act, right? So the Canada Health Act has those 5 stipulations that provinces must comply with in order to receive the Canada Health Transfer. And I think through amending that, we can establish some national long-term care standards for our seniors and make sure that they have the supports they need as they age gracefully.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. Well, we really have an obligation in terms of creating a fair, compassionate social safety net, particularly when we think about the seniors that have contributed so much of their life and commitments to our to our community. So in terms of looking at how we ensure and support seniors after so many years of contributing to society, the prioritizing pharmacare is going to be critical in terms of reducing that financial burden. Looking at affordable housing and the different ways to ensure that we look through a senior's lens when we're looking at access to housing. Ensuring that we address public transit issues. The guaranteed livable income as well would ensure that it gives seniors a chance to enjoy their life as they age in a way that they can still contribute to society, but also not be overly burdened.
And thank you very much. All right, over to microphone number 1.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Thank you. Bernadette Armstrong. I'm from Langford. So my question is, it's already been stated, Cowichan-Malahat has demographic and geographic...
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to- all candidates?
Oh, all candidates,
Okay.
sorry. All
you.
candidates, and I have no affiliation. Cowichan-Malahat has demographic and geographic differences from no tree left standing in Langford. How will you personally engage and understand the concerns of not only Cowichan-Malahat residents, but also the residents of Langford while you reside in Duncan and Ottawa?
Ms. DeLong, we start with you.
Oh, I think it's a very important question. One of the things that I've been doing is knocking on doors everywhere. Well, not quite. I still have not made it to Port Renfrew. I'm sorry, Port Renfrew, but I will get there. But I have been all over this riding with from the way in the back hills and to the towns, and I've been spending quite a bit of time in Langford. And yes, it's all different, but people are different everywhere. I expect always when I go to a door to find an individual. And I expect an individual door will be absolutely unique. And that's what I do find. And so I find it actually quite refreshing to always be challenged, to always see life through everyone's different eyes. And yes, there is incredible
And thank you very
diversity
much.
here.
Mr. MacGregor.
I'm really glad to see a Langford resident has made it up to the Cowichan Valley. One of my main efforts as the Member of Parliament for this great riding over the last 4 years was to make sure I had 2 constituency offices. So I do have one in Duncan, and yes, the Cowichan Valley has the lion's share of the population, but Langford is probably equal to about 1/3 of the riding. And so that's why I've had my constituency office there right on Happy Valley Road, so that Langford residents know they have a point of contact, an actual person to come and see face-to-face should they need services or help from the federal government. I also think it means that you need to champion the issues that matter to Langford residents. There are a lot of young families, and of course the issues with regards to transportation are big. So we need to make sure projects like the ENN Railway are a central focus, making sure that connection from West Shore communities to downtown Victoria is addressing the very real transportation concerns that many residents of Langford have, because that city is growing at a phenomenal rate.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thanks very much. It's really important, of course, to realize the regional and geographic differences in this very large riding, and ensure that when we're looking at the demographics and we're understanding the best we can the population, to then take the next step to ensure that we're actually engaging in a process that assists in setting priorities within the regions. Again, during the First Nations Health Authority and that development, we're in the early stages, wanted to ensure that we were making the best investments based on the priorities of the different regions within the province. And I think that's a step we could take in ensuring that we know we have the best information we have, we engage with citizens in a way that lets us identify the priorities and therefore make the best investments we can based on those priorities.
Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. One of the issues with Cowichan-Malahat-Langford is that it's such a large and diverse riding. 5,500 square kilometers. It's large, and then we've got a mountain range running right through the middle of it. Langford actually, Langford and the Highlands down south are about 45% of the riding actually. Langford is growing at such an incredible rate that probably by the next election it'll be 55% of the riding. So I would be establishing a constituency office in both Duncan and Langford, and right now I live in Mill Bay, so I would be sort of halfway in between. I agree that transportation is a large issue in Langford. Anybody that gets the ability to enjoy the Colwood crawl for an hour in the morning, if you happen to have to go down to Victoria, knows what a problem it is. We have in the past little while we have spent quite a bit of money on the Mackenzie interchange, and it's unfortunate. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. All right, and that is our final question of the evening. I'll give the candidates a few moments to gather your thoughts, and we'll move into closing statements. Okay, are we all set? So 3 minutes. Ms. Hwitsum, we start with you.
Thanks very much. I want to start off by, again, acknowledging all of you that are still here and those that had a chance to bring their questions forward. Again, I'm thankful that I'm being able to embark on this path. I feel like the work that I've been doing in terms of I'm getting my law degree because of my concern for social justice and recognizing that that's the sort of tool you need to make impacts. The work in terms of focusing my undergrad work in the Faculty of Human and Social Development at UVic, those pieces I think are all tools that I've gathered in my toolkit that really equip me well to serve and provide service to this riding. You know, in this time of climate emergency, we know we need to ensure that we have a plan, and the Green have a Green Climate Action Plan that helps us and sets the targets for transitioning towards a strong green economy, investing in the renewable energy that creates a pathway for sustainability for us today and moving into the future for future generations. We need to renew the social contract that we have with Canadians with respect to childcare, health, education, our seniors, and affordability. We need another green voice in Parliament, and another green voice in Parliament will make a difference. I would just like to add that it's my hope, certainly, that in getting my voice into the Canadian Parliament, that you will hear my traditional language spoken as well, and that's Hwitsum. And we start to see and build the sort of diversity and incorporate the sort of worldviews that help us solve the problems that we face on so many levels. Being able to collaborate at all levels, at the federal government, recognizing the jurisdictional divides that between the province, the feds, local government, start taking a more collaborative approach and understanding it's through that way of finding answers by working together. We'll find answers we didn't even know were there before because we take the steps to work together and understand that Canadians deserve honest, ethical, and caring leadership. That, with the skill, the values that I support and honor in terms of the green value framework, the steps that we can take to have a green voice in Parliament making a difference in terms of holding other parties' feet to the fire when it comes to the commitments they make to Canadians, particularly with respect to climate change and the climate emergency we face. So I lift my hands up to you all. Thank you, respected ones, for your time here tonight, and I look forward to your support, and really there is a lot of value to another green voice in Parliament. Thank you.
Ms. DeLong.
You know, it's been really interesting at the doors. It's been really interesting because I see so many people really thinking about what to do with this election. And what I do urge you is to understand that this is not about the various parties. This is about you. This is your election. This is what when you get to say. And you know, we can tell you that, you know, what we're working on in this coming term is going to be making your life more affordable, so that you end up with some money left in your pocket at the end of the month, so that you've got money for your kids, you've got money for your parents. You know, you've got money to live the life that you want to live. And so, you know, all of our announcements are all along those lines. So we're reducing the income tax. We're taking the GST off of your home heating. We're increasing the seniors deductible to by $1,000. We're doing a whole series of things that all end up with more money in your pocket. Even when it comes to the environment, what we're working on is things like your home insulation and upgrading your windows and giving you a credit for that. So again, you know, that if you've got the capital to be able to do that, then you can again get your cost of living down. And so this election is all about you. You know, what is it that your family needs? And so I'm hoping that you will support me in this election, but it's about you, and I'm hoping that you will get the government that you want. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I think the summary of what New Democrats are offering can be said in this way: that in our pursuit of environmental justice, it cannot be realized unless there is economic justice and social justice. And that is the heart of our platform. It's putting people first. The most disadvantaged members of our society have always been the core constituency of who New Democrats fight for. For many of you, I know this is going to be a difficult choice. When you're at the ballot box, you have to consider the party's platform, the things the leader is representing, what they have said and done, what they have identified as priorities. But there's also that third choice, your local candidate. And I hope that you can take a good hard look at my 4 years where I've served as your member of parliament for this amazing riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. And particularly when you're looking at the values that motivate you as a person in this constituency. I hope you can look at all of the issues I have fought for on your behalf, raised consistently and constantly in the House of Commons, and see something of yourselves reflected in that fight. You know, one of the things that's always drawn me to New Democrats is that while others may want to talk about what they want to do, New Democrats can talk about what they have done. In almost every single issue that has mattered to the people here tonight, there is a New Democratic legislative initiative. We are the party that has brought in legislation for the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We are the party that brought in a bill to regulate fish farms and bring them on land. We are the party that has been fighting for health care, has brought in a bill to establish an environmental bill of rights, and of course, a whole host of others. That's the thing about New Democrats, is that we have something tangible, real tangible legislative initiatives that we would pursue if we were ever in a position of power. That is our commitment to you. And I'll end by this. I think that any member of parliament has to clearly demonstrate their commitment to their community. My constituency office has a track record of intervening successfully in over 800 casework files where we have intervened to help the constituents of this riding with the problems they're having with the federal government. And with that note, I would just like to say that, 4 years ago, I was honored to earn your trust to serve in this role. And I hope very much so that through this campaign, I have displayed the fortitude and the integrity to re-earn that trust so that I may continue in this important role past October 21st for the 43rd Parliament. Thank you all so very much.
Mr. Herbert.
Thank you for your questions tonight. Most people that we speak with are struggling with the amount of noise in this campaign, and they're trying to determine is it rhetoric or is it truth? They are trying to determine if I represent their values, does the Liberal Party represent their values? I stand with the voters in the middle of the political spectrum because I believe that is where we get the most progress. I have been in the real estate industry for 27 years, and I bring people together to accomplish a number of things. When I have one party that is entrenched in their position, those deals do not come together. Compromise is not a bad word in our profession. It's no different in politics. Even in our community, we have the Conservatives on the one side that insist there is really nothing to be done about climate change. Then we have the Green NDP that suggests that we can fix this problem at record speed. So those with entrenched positions continue to vote either left or right, just to continue the fight sometimes. No room for compromise. If we actually want to make progress on the environmental file, we have to try and include everyone. We have to move forward at a speed that does not damage our economy. Right now, we have 23 million vehicles in this country that run on fossil fuels. Less than 100 of them run on electricity. Not even green people are buying green. My goal is that within the next 4 years, we're able to get to a point where 30% of the new car purchases are electric. That would mean having 600,000 electric vehicles coming onto the market every year. Once we get there, it changes the whole dynamic of the oil industry in this country. We would be well on our way to transition. If the Conservatives form government, climate initiatives will cease. Right now in this room, we have 500 people that have the ability to change the world. Your personal actions on local climate issues can make nationwide impacts. Just start. No matter how small, just start. Refuse that plastic straw at the restaurant. Refuse that plastic bag in your sandwich at Subway, or refuse that coffee sleeve at Tim Hortons. The market will respond and give you what you will accept. Be the change. I want to be able to make positive impact on people's lives and make an impact in Ottawa for this community. I want to be part of a government that lifts 300,000 children out of poverty. I want to be part of a government that helps Canadians create over 1 million jobs. And I want to be part of a government that makes significant strides in reducing greenhouse gas emissions that exceed our Paris targets ahead of schedule. I want to be your member of Parliament. I would be honored by your vote on October 21st. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will step away, but just quickly, thank you very much. We got through some 26 questions this evening, so covered a lot of ground, so thank you for that. I will step away now, and Mr. Duncan of the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce will come in for closing remarks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the point where we need to bring our evening to a close. There's a lot of great questions asked here tonight from the crowd, and we thank everyone for their participation in the night. But before we do leave, we need to acknowledge the following. Thank you to Wade Simmons, moderator extraordinaire, for your excellent facilitation. And thank you again to our presenting partner, Island Savings, and to our media sponsor, the Cowichan Valley Citizen. I'd also like to acknowledge the students from Queen Margaret School and Shawnigan Lake School for their efforts tonight in delivering the questions from the audience. Also like to thank the ruthless timekeepers up at the front, Pam Stover and Karen Bressler, members of our chamber board. And also our thanks to the team at the Cowichan Performing Arts Centre and VITV for filming tonight's forum and preparing it for upload for tomorrow on social media. And last but not least, thank you to all our candidates for your time and public service. We wish you the best in your respective campaigns. Reminder, advance voting opens this weekend. And with that, we bid you good night and get out and vote. Thank you.